All right, welcome everyone. My name is Danielle. I'm one of the Education USA Mexico City interns for the summer. Basically, I created this SAT prep series for you all, hopefully to help you guys, get introduced to the SAT, specifically with all the different sections. And yeah, so I'm going to explain the reading section and kind of how we can start practicing and reviewing for it. So, with that said, welcome everyone. I'm also joined by one of the advisors from Education USA, Magali, if she would like to introduce herself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you are here, and please take notes. If you have any questions, we can answer them at the end. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Magali. All right, so we're gonna get started then. So just so we have some interaction and you guys aren't just watching me lecture the whole time, we have an icebreaker here, and it's gonna start off just saying what your favorite book is. For me, it's not necessarily the best written book, but the book that kind of stuck with me was this book called Ella Minnow P, which is a play on the words of like when you're saying the alphabet, like JKLMNOP, except it's Ella Minnow P. And I think it's a really funny book about linguistics. So that's probably my favorite book still. I read it in high school. And if you guys want to mute and just kind of share like your favorite book, feel free. You don't have to raise your hand. Or you can also use the chat feature, yeah. Oh, I like Percy Jackson too. So yeah, you guys can unmute or just put in the chat what your guys' favorite books are. Yeah. You know what's funny? I've never actually read Little Women. Probably bad on my part, but definitely like my friends were talking about it the other day. So good coincidence. I've also never read Pride and Prejudice, so I gotta get on that. Yeah. Thank you guys. So yeah, we'll get right started into it. Okay. So if you're here for the first section, this is kind of a review on what to expect for the SAT. What is the SAT? It's short for the Scholastic Assessment Test. And the SAT is an entrance exam used by most colleges and universities to measure a high school student's readiness for college and to make admissions decisions. So SAT has 4 sections, as we know. We have the reading section, which is the longest in the SAT with 65 minutes for you to answer all the questions. Writing and language is 35 minutes. Math with no calculator is 25 minutes. And math with calculator is 55 minutes, which seems crazy because theoretically, I mean, the thought that comes to my mind is if math has no calculator, wouldn't it take longer to solve the problems? That's just my thought process. But generally, each section does vary by question, so that's probably why there's the variance in time intervals. So reading is our section for today. You're probably wondering, okay, well, what's the reading test? So we mentioned the interval, 65 minutes, to answer a total of 52 questions. So the reading test will have 4 text passages and 1 pair of passages that must be read together. The passages are usually of the following subjects. So typically you'll have 1 passage that's like a work of fiction, taken most likely from a book that you'll never have read before. From my experiences, they've usually just been really niche authors that I had never heard before, with the exception of 1 passage being from Virginia Woolf, if you've read Virginia Woolf. In addition, there's 1 to 2 passage of a social studies related document. one passage from a work of economics, psychology, sociology, or another social science, and then you'll have two passages that are related to science typically. So about Earth, biology, chemistry, and physics. So these vary depending on the test, but generally this is what you should kind of expect from the SAT. Is like maybe you'll have two social science passages, a passage on a fictional narrative, and then you'll have like a science one. But you'll generally always have fiction, social studies, nonfiction, and a scientific work, also nonfiction. Or you'll have sci-fi, which I think happens occasionally, but not too often. So that does happen. So that's kind of what types of passages you should expect. So how do I go about this? Well, the 52 questions will be about the passages you read. So you must read the passages carefully and then answer the questions that follow. So the thing about this is theoretically, right, you read the passage and you'll be like, oh, okay, if I read the passage, I'll understand the questions and I'll get all the questions right. However, there are some strategies that we're going to go over in the reading test that, for some people, it might work better to skim a passage time-wise, or take like special notes on the side of the margins. So generally, we're going to try to find strategies that work better for you so you can save time and also interpret the passages correctly when you do read them. Because by reading carefully, sometimes you'll be reading and then it'll be like, I've read this part like a million times and I still don't understand this, which happens. Unfortunately, I do read fast, but I do have the problem of sometimes I don't understand what they're saying at all, which is okay because these sections are meant to trick you sometimes. So all questions in the reading test are multiple choice. This makes the exam easier as strategies such as the process of elimination can be used to help find the answer. So one of the things that you'll notice about the SAT is everything with the exception of the essay is multiple choice. So if you have some knowledge of test taking, you'll know like the process of elimination is like where you just look at the options. If there's one that just like makes no sense at all, you'll eliminate it. It can't be that. So those strategies can work, but regardless, you'd still have to understand what the question is asking and how it relates to the passage. So I wouldn't rely on this too much, especially if you need to work on your interpretation skills, which we will do. There are multiple types of questions in the reading test, and they ask about different aspects of the passages. I'm going to go over some examples on the types of questions and how you can prepare. So, example set of questions. So we have a passage here. This passage is adopted from Saki, the Schwartz Metterklume method, published in 1911. So this is the general theme for most of the passages. They're going to be from places that you won't understand, and it's a little difficult to understand the writing style for some of these passages, but I think generally you should, be able to get the main ideas across. So we're gonna do some calling out here, just kind of, seeing what you guys think. So when you see this passage and you see the problems or the questions on the side, generally, how do you think we should approach this passage and these questions? You can raise your hand or just unmute, just kind of telling me your thought process on where do you think we should get started. Type.
I'd say we should start by reading the question. That will give us a general idea of the answer we are searching for.
Great answer. Thank you. So a lot of people have this work for them really well. They read the questions, so they don't necessarily waste their time on details that the questions aren't asking for. So here we have the first question. Which choice best summarizes the passage? So now we know when we're reading the passage, okay, which choice best summarizes the passage? We're looking for a main idea or summary of what interaction is going on in this passage. 2, in line 2, turn most nearly means. And then look, you're going to look at line 2 and you're going to see, okay, Lady Carlotta stepped out onto the platform of the small wayside station and took a turn or two up and down its uninteresting length. So this is referring to like a walk, because it's showing how she's going on this platform, going across, kind of, loitering a little bit. So that's how we answer two. Boom. We didn't even have to read the rest of the passage. Number 3, the passage most clearly implies that other people regarding Lady Carlotta as. So without, knowing what the story or the main idea is yet, okay, what aspect of this passage do you think we're going to be looking for to make sure we understand people's perspective of Lady Carlotta? You can just unmute or say in the chat what part of the passage you think we should be looking towards. Do you guys want a hint? I can give you guys a hint. So when the passage questions ask about opinions, instantly you're going to look at the surrounding areas of dialogue. So for example, okay, I can already see there's some dialogue in the second column. Okay. She wired a vague non-committal message to her destination to say that she was coming on by another train. Skip down a little more. You must be Miss Hope, the governess I've come to meet, said the apparition. Blah, blah, blah. So here in the dialogues, we can kind of see where we're starting to get the answer of the question, because, people are talking about in the dialogues, if I'm skimming quickly enough. On astray. How provoking. These railway companies are so careless. However, my maid can lend you things for the night. So people are very, careful and very concerned for Lady Carlotta, which we can see in the passage. And we look at the options: outspoken, tactful, ambitious, unfriendly. Well, unfriendly we can immediately eliminate, which is what we use for the process of elimination. If we look more into this, and if you guys want to bring up something, like, just feel free to unmute if there's something I'm missing in the passages, because I guarantee you guys are like super smart. Okay, well, anyways, probably should have read the passage before. Anyways, so question 4, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So kind of going back to what I was saying about looking at dialogue, question 4 is a perfect example why you do, because if we look at the lines for the proof that we're going to be saying in question 3, lines 10 to 14, let's look at line 10, and put rather a different complexion on the struggle. Certain of her acquaintances were wont to give her plentiful admonition as to the undesirability of interfering on behalf of a distressed animal, such interference being none of her business. So this line is a little weird, because this is more so like someone else, like the narrator, not really another person in the story, talking about Lady Carlotta. So let's look at the other options. Lines 22 to 23. It is to be feared that she lost the friendship of the ultimately rescued lady. On this occasion, she merely lost the train. So it seems that we do have some evidence to suggest, maybe she was unfriendly. If we do choose the unfriendly option, then we might as well use this as proof, because it kind of shows how she lost a friendship. So if we look at the other options, let me see. Let me move my lines 23 to 26. On this occasion, she merely lost the train, which gave way to the first sign of impatience it had shown throughout the journey, and steamed off without her. I think this one is actually talking about her distress of the train leaving her behind. So if we look at the options here, this piece of evidence wouldn't support really any of the options, which is why I would say we probably just eliminate this one entirely. There's nothing really said about impatience. Instead, there's tactfulness, which this exact quote contradicts. So, on this occasion, she merely lost the train, which gave way to the first sign of impatience it had shown throughout the journey and steamed off without her. So, and it's also more so talking about the train, which we're not interested in. We're interested in people's perspective on Lady Carlotta. So the last section, if I can see the thing, lines 32, 32. She wired a vague non-committal message to her destination to say that she was coming on by another train. Once again, this is context that doesn't really make too much sense. She wired a vague non-committal message. So in choice 3, outspoken, tactful, ambitious, like none of these really fit into this one. So we can kind of include that C and D kind of have no relevance as evidence regardless of the options in 3, which is why it's pretty good advice to read the questions first. But generally, as someone who has just not read the passage yet, we can already make inferences or guesses on what direction the passage is probably going and what we should be looking for. And yeah, so does anyone have any thoughts about this passage? Did anyone actually take the time to read through this passage and kind of
I
say
have a
what?
question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible that maybe like for the ones about the passage that we read first like just the lines and from there like get an answer for the question number 3?
Yeah, you can honestly just look at the lines and like, because it has to be one of those options, right? And you have to decide like, okay, well, one of this has to be evidence. So when you have the questions first and you see how these two like interact with each other, like you need to find proof to support your answer of 3. Absolutely. My only concern is that sometimes they have red herrings in there because they know that you're going to want to, jump to the questions. Some people, they might throw in ones that have like no relevance to how people regard Lady Carlotta. So like the C for number 4 is talking about the train and Miss and Lady Carlotta. So it might throw you off, but generally you should make sure your number 4 has lines relevant to Lady Carlotta and some sort of interaction with other people. Right. So that's my advice for it. And yeah, I think,
Okay, thank you.
I hope that helps. Yeah. Did you guys actually take the time to read the passage? Because actually I was doing this as an exercise for me as well, because I hadn't read the passage before. Were you guys able to read through it and kind of guess what answers you had to the questions? If not, that's okay. I'm showing strategies on like how to quickly answer things or rule out things without, reading the entire thing, which is fine. If not, that's okay. Anyways, I haven't read it entirely. No, that's okay. Yeah. Because the hope is you don't have to read the whole thing and then reread it again. Because if you read it, you don't understand some parts of the questions, and you have to read it again. That is a lot of time wasted. So you don't want to do that. So hopefully this approach to like kind of dissecting the passage and knowing where to look helps you, and also identifying questions that are connected to each other. So let me see what the next passage is. Okay. So here I'm going to kind of go over some of the things that you should be looking for when looking at these questions. So the first type of question is like big picture, main point, summary kind of questions. Like the the one we had before. Which choice best summarizes the passage? This kind of question asks about what the overall purpose of the passage is, or why it was written. Or in this case, what is the premise of the passage? What happened? Passages can be written for a variety of reasons, such as to inform, prove, parody, or hypothesize something. So here's another example. The main purpose of each passage is to compare brain function in those who play games on the internet and those who browse on it. B, report on the problem-solving skills of individuals with varying levels of internet experience. C, take a position on the increasing financial support for studies relating to technology and intelligence. D, make an argument about the effects of electronic media use on the brain. So we mentioned before there's a variety of reasons to inform, prove, parody, or hypothesize. So here in the main purpose, we can also see the outline of the different intentions of the passage. The first one is comparison, which sometimes the passage will have two different things they're comparing. Boom, then we pick A. B, report on. So this is an analysis paper. It's not necessarily arguing, but it's typically going to have a lot of observations and research and charts probably. So if that's the case, usually B. C, take a position on increasing financial support for studies relating to technology and intelligence. We'd have to see the sections relating to technology and intelligence to see if the author is taking a position and defending it, and see if all of these things relate to argument, which is a little too similar to D, where it says make an argument about the effects of electronic media use on the brain. The difference between C and D is obviously you need to check the passage to see what they're actually talking about, but also take a position versus making an argument. Making an argument means they're also concerned with refuting previous ideas about the use of electronic media. C is more so, defensive, showing proof of their view on this and this. D, you usually see the counterpoints and whatnot. So the answers can be divided pretty evenly for the main purpose questions, because you can kind of tell from the passage, from skimming it, oh, this is comparing this and this in this context. Boom. That's usually what you should expect. And yeah, detail. So we're going to pretty much kind of reference the previous passage we looked at. So this kind of question asks about specific detail in a portion of the passage. It asks about the purpose or technique of the detail. So the example references the past passage we read, the description of how Lady Carlotta put the doctrine of non-interference into practice. Lines 14 and 15, mainly serves too. And then you'd go back and read the passage and let's see 14. Okay, read the passage. Generally, when you have questions like this, my immediate response is to read a little bit of the text before, if we're looking at these lines, and a little bit back, because you might miss really important context, and this is how they throw you off. They'll say these lines, but if you don't understand the context of the lines, you'll pick a wrong answer, or an answer that seems really similar. So let's read. Certain of her acquaintances were wont to give her plentiful admonition, as to the undesirability of interfering on behalf of a distressed animal, such interference being none of her business. Only once had she put the doctrine of non-interference into practice, when one of its most eloquent exponents had been besieged for nearly 3 hours in a small and extremely uncomfortable May-tree by an angry boar-pig, while Lady Carlotta on the other side of the fence had proceeded with the watercolor sketch she was engaged on and refused to interfere between the boar and his prisoner. So it shows, to interpret this passage, okay, it seems like Lady Carlotta just, seems to always be the type of person that interferes in the face of conflict, right? Except in this example, where there was this pig, and Lady Carlotta just kind of, went about her day and didn't do anything. But that's the only time she's ever done that. So we look back here. Description of how Lady Carlotta put the doctrine of non-interference into practice mainly serves to A. Foreshadow her capacity for deception, B. Illustrate the subtle cruelty in her nature, C. Provide a humorous insight into her character, D. Explain a surprising change in her behavior. So if we're looking back, okay, because if it's assumed that she generally, is very outspoken, see the reference of the third question, and involved in these types of affairs, then it kind of shows how this is kind of a surprising change in her behavior, right? Right, exactly. Because A, foreshadow, we don't know enough to say it would foreshadow yet. B, illustrate the subtle cruelty in her nature. Let me actually look back at the passage. Well, it's hard to say, because if you haven't read the rest of the passage, I mean, we wouldn't really know, which is why you would probably need to scan the other parts of the passage to make sure it kind of confirms this part. But just solely through these lines alone, okay, it's just a surprising change in her behavior. Boom. So that's kind of how you go across these questions. And generally, if you generally just want to read the entire passage, skimming with light notes is really important, which we'll get into. Okay. Inference. So inference means like a guess, educated guess. This kind of question asks for the meaning of some excerpt from a passage. Example question. The passage most clearly implies that other people regarded Lady Carlotta as. So as I mentioned, you'd have to read the dialogues, or you'd have to read the lines that they give you to support this guess. So without actually, I probably should have given you guys time to read the passage. I should have read the passage, but that's okay. This is the same example as the one we kind of walked through earlier. Some of the evidence kind of lined with D, but the problem is with D, it also contradicts like a lot of the other stuff we've seen about Lady Carlotta. I mentioned outspoken, but like we still haven't read the passage and we're still already getting a pretty good understanding of how to answer the question. Also, one thing with these questions I've noticed, outspoken and ambitious. You notice how these are like really similar to each other? Obviously, outspoken is a little different than ambition. But sometimes they'll put two words that are like really similar, or at least have the same connotation. Connotation is like meaning or like emotion given. So, and then you have like this one here, D, unfriendly, as like the red herring, which is like a false hope for you to circle it because it's the most different one. But you have to work with these three in order to find like the true one. But you will usually see this where they'll throw you off and put like three really similar-ish connotation words or two, and then the other one is just like out of the open. Because what they'll think is you'll assume from like the evidence in the other question is like, oh, well, if this part shows her being mean in this line, then oh, it's obviously unfriendly, boom. And then you'll see another line and it's like, oh, this also talks about being unfriendly. Then you'll kind of realize it's not friendly, because if there's two lines of evidence, then you can't pick either or. It has to be one of the other ones that is from the passage or from one of the other lines of interaction that exactly shows the context of the passage. So that's a little tip I have that I've noticed. Vocabulary. So we kind of talked about this one too. This kind of question asks about the meaning of a specific word or phrase in a passage. The meaning can be complicated, so looking at the context around it is important. we use this strategy for number 2 when looking at detail, just kind of reading the passage a little surrounding. In line 2, turn most likely nearly means, and then we kind of mentioned it was like C, right? Because she's kind of loitering and she's kind of like going around the train station doing whatever. So also the way these questions are structured, okay, when you think of turn, obviously your mind is going to go to B. You're going to be like, oh, well, duh, turning is me going to the left or going to the right. They'll put these general definitions, but chances are it's not going to be the general definition. Like every single SAT prep I've seen, it's always going to be like, you need, if you see like the dictionary definition, boom, scratch off, because they throw you off that way. They're going to make you think like, oh, well, duh, I know what a turn is. But notice how you're reading a passage from 1911. Like, there's going to be different connotations and different meanings, which is why immediately you read the context and you're like, oh, turn. Okay, so she's like kind of tracing back and forth on the train station. C. Course correction, no, because it doesn't really imply she's particularly going anywhere. B, we know it's not B. And then A, slight movement, not really, because if it was like a slight movement, it should just be like inching a little bit. But she's not inching, she's kind of wandering around. So boom. We didn't even read the passage. We answered this question. Good stuff. Okay. Function. This kind of question, similar to detail questions, focuses mainly on what effect some passage detail has on the whole passage. The analogy in the final sentence of passage 2 has primarily which effect? A, it uses ornate language to illustrate a difficult concept. B, it employs humor to soften a severe opinion on human behavior. C, it alludes to the past to evoke a nostalgic response. D, it criticizes the view of a particular group. So this actually doesn't really relate to the last passage, but it's an example nonetheless. Typically, with these types of questions, I mean, there's only so many effects it's going to accomplish, right? You'll have humor, you'll have the abstract concept, you'll have the flashback / foreshadow answer, and then D is the criticism. So I have an interesting point for you guys to think on. So remember in this one, the main point, how we're like, okay, is this a comparison piece? Is this an argument piece? An analysis? Look at this. Illustrate a difficult concept. Abstraction / analysis falls into this one. B, employs humor. I swear we had another one. Look, provide a humorous insight into a character. These all kind of connect indirectly to the type of answers you should expect. It alludes to the past. We had another one about, foreshadowing. And D, criticizes the viewpoint of a particular group. It would have to be an argumentative piece for us to pick this one, right? So they're all kind of similar so long as you understand what the passage is. So it's like, okay, if I'm talking about human behavior and it's an analysis and we have charts and whatnot, chances are it's not going to relate to a lot of these other ones, which is why you read the example of the passage regardless to make sure, because sometimes they do throw you off. One thing about the SAT is it's really infamous for like trying to trick you, which is kind of stupid because you should just be able to understand without like any trickery or feeling like you're being deceived on purpose. It most likely wouldn't be C either, because if it's an analytical piece, why would it allude to the past or like use flashback foreshadowing techniques? C would be like for a narrative piece. So immediately, without even knowing what this passage is, we know what to look for. D, if it's arguing something, or it's talking about a particular group, and then it's D. But otherwise, the one that we'll typically consider the most would be A. in the event that it's an analytical, more science or research-based passage. Boom. And then likewise, you can say the same thing for all the other answers. So yeah, we didn't even have a passage. And we kind of already knew, what to check off. So last one. Is it? No, it's not the last one. My bad. Author technique. Okay. This kind of question focuses on how the author wrote, specifically about the features of the author's writing. This includes tone, style, voice, attitude, or perspective. So if you guys know, tone is like the author's own feelings towards the piece through their writing. Voice is like a reflection of that, just kind of how they use language to amplify their own voice or message or purpose. Attitude, it's along the same style, like these are all aspects of the author making the book. So you're probably wondering, I've never met the author. How am I going to know like what the author's attitude is towards the book? Okay, I get you. But they kind of help you out. How do the words can, may, and could in the third paragraph, lines 19 to 41, help establish the tone of the paragraph? Okay, so we look at the words can, may, and could. Can, may, and could. So we're seeing a lot of like uncertainty. One could even say it's like doubt. But I could also see can, may, and could as like optimistic, because it's like, yeah, I can do it. I could do it. But the word may kind of throws us off. So there's a lot of uncertainty, because if we had language, right, that was like very certain, they wouldn't use can or may or could. It would be direct, like stated, clear. Other words like certain. So we have words from the third paragraph. Obviously, you would go back to these lines and kind of skim through it again to make sure. But let's read the options. They create an optimistic tone that makes clear the author is hopeful about the effects of their research on colony collapse disorder. B, they create a dubious tone that makes it clear the authors do not have confidence in the usefulness of the research described. C, they create a tentative tone that makes it clear the author suspects, but doesn't know that their hypothesis is correct. D, they create a critical tone that makes clear the author is skeptical of claims that pyrothrums are inherent in monocrops. So obviously, without reading the passage, it's like really difficult to answer this question, right? But generally, if we were to eliminate one, okay. Okay, well, okay. First of all, there's one in here that we can automatically eliminate. Do any of you guys have an idea on which one we could eliminate just right off the bat? Do you guys know? Okay. Okay, yeah. I could see an argument for that one. Now that I come to think of it, there's two I would probably automatically eliminate, and I'll explain why. Anyone else have an idea on what answer they can? Okay, see, you guys are like way faster than me. So the ones that I immediately thought of eliminating, B and D. Why? B, dubious tone that makes it clear the author does not have confidence in the research described. Okay, if they didn't have confidence, they would be like, oh, well, yeah, like, actually, no, they wouldn't. They'd just be like completely negative Nancy on the research. So B, we don't need B. D, skeptical of claims. If they were skeptical, why are they saying can or may or could? like is same as same as B, right? It's going to be, there's no proof of can, may, and could being negative words. So as Tab says, it's going to be C most likely, because can, may, and could, it's like, okay, there's some substance to this, but with most research, I mean, we're in the process of figuring it out, okay? The authors are leaning towards this way, but A, of course, is like taking that too far and being like, it's kind of disregarding the may in the words chosen. So you guys are like super smart and like big brain, and like you guys read my mind already. I would most likely put C. Literally, I haven't even read the passage, and you guys already know the answer. B, D, and A we kind of already rolled out just on the choice of the words alone. Is it possible that the other ones could be right by reading the passage? Maybe in the next sentence they're going to be like, oh, well, but I have absolute optimism that I am correct. Okay. But it's asking, how do the words can, may, and could help establish the paragraph or the tone of the paragraph? It's those specific words, and we're finding the tone. So good job, guys. You guys are so smart. Back in high school, I would have definitely sucked at this. I'm still like, I have a negative history with test taking, but I had gotten better. And obviously I'm in college, so you kind of are forced to handle information that's a lot more intense and stuff like this. So you guys will too. Evidence. This kind of question is found after one of the question types, and it asks to provide the excerpt of the passage. So we kind of went over this already. This is taken from the last passage we saw, with the same lines, and I think I kind of already talked about it a little bit. I'm gonna take a middle break here. Do you guys have any questions so far on the kind of information that you should expect with the passages? Any questions? Oh yeah. No. Okay. Cool. Does this stuff make sense to you guys? I know it's a lot, and I'm talking a lot. Yeah, exactly. Which is why you don't want to try to dissect every single part of the passage. You're just here to answer questions. So if you read the passages and you're like, obviously if English isn't your first languages, you're gonna struggle a lot with these. Dude, even as someone like in the States, okay, why do you think a lot of people do really bad on these tests? Because they're picking passages from 1911 and expecting you to understand the different contexts of words in the passage when no one talks like this anymore. Of course, it's going to be difficult, especially if you don't even know like some of the sentences. Like when one of its most eloquent exponents, like, I don't even get that, but you don't need to understand that, because if it's not asking for it, you're good. Or if it's asking about something else in the sentence, you're good. So that's why I try to have you guys avoid, obsessing over the fact that like maybe your English sucks and you feel like, oh, well, I don't understand this passage, I'm screwed. You can still like work your way through these questions without even like reading the passage, right? And identify. The key of these is just identifying stuff. It's a test of identifying, not how good you can do certain stuff. All right. So we kind of went over evidence. So I'm going to go over this one. Unless you guys have questions, feel free to just unmute or just put in the chat. Okay. So this type of question, we have data interpretation. You will 100% have a passage like this. It'll ask you to interpret information found in the data graphics in some passages. This general type of question is for passages in the sciences. So it'll be like, okay, so remember how we had the question back here. Let me try to find it. I swear one of these was talking about, okay, yeah, author technique, colony collapse disorder. So we have the science section here asking stuff about the words and what they mean. We're using the same exact graph from that question. So here's the actual graph. Okay. Pathogen occurrence in honeybee colonies with and without colony collapse disorder. Okay. You probably won't even know what that is. From the name, I'm going to be like, colony collapses, and that's a disorder. But here you'll kind of see how there's a description actually on what this thing is. So the table above shows for colonies with colony collapse disorder and for colonies without, the percentage of colonies having honeybees infected by each of the 4 pathogens and by all 4 pathogens together. So I highly recommend, okay, when you read the question, you also look at the little texts, you know, at the bottom, not the citation, like the adapted from Diana, like the citations won't have crap for you to understand. It's these little information things, because right here, automatically, what are we looking for? Okay, we have the pathogens in the Y of the graph, where it's like, okay, we're looking at these 2 viruses, we're looking at these 2 fungi, and we're totaling up that sum at the bottom. Boom. And we're comparing that with colonies with the colony collapse disorder and the colonies without the disorder, and the percentage of the colonies affected. So we have the question, based on the data in the table, in what percent of colonies with this disorder were the honeybees infected by all 4 pathogens? It should be pretty easy from here. You're going to look at the percentage. We're going to look at the colony, or not the colony, the column. Colonies with the disorder. All 4 pathogens, boom. We look on the left side. All 4 pathogens, boom. 77. Obviously, you're not going to take this million years to answer this question. I'm walking through it so you guys know, okay, if like English isn't your first language, or you suck at science like I do, at least you know how to read a graph, which is literally all the thing is like asserting. I know there's like all these like complex stuff, and you're like, but typically the bottom part here is just the sum. And if it's asking for all 4 of the pathogens, boom, 77, you're done. Oh, we have people going. Okay. Thank you guys for coming. Hope you guys come back, and I hope you guys are doing okay. Someone is asking. Okay, so for context, since we're asking about the recording sessions, by the end of SAT prep for the summer, we're gonna have all of it up on like our YouTube usually, right? So you guys should expect to receive it after the series is done, which is usually going to be like near the end of the summer, unfortunately, and you guys won't see me again, but it's okay. Because you guys will go on to ace the SAT and do better than me, because I got admitted during COVID, so testing was a little bit of a a situation. But now that you guys are kind of getting back into something more normal, then you guys will probably have to take the test. I didn't, but chances are if you're international, you'll probably have to take it. So feels bad, but yeah. Tab says, yeah, I was ready to start some operations. Law was easy. Yeah, you shouldn't have to be doing any math for these. You should literally just look at the graph, be like, oh, okay, it's right there. And like, it's just how to read a graph. So this part's usually like the easiest, but sometimes the graphs are like complicated for no reason. And we'll probably see some of those examples in coming sessions. But yeah, you are not doing math for the reading science sections, which is ironic because it's science and math, but it's only assessing reading. So you don't have to do anything. Woohoo. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Where can I learn more? So the College Board has their own website for SAT reading. The link is right there to kind of look at more information about the reading section. So how can I prepare? Okay, even though you won't necessarily need to read everything and understand everything, I think it's good to kind of go through practice exams of the section. And also use accurate timing. So you'll have the 5 passages and you're going to read for, you're going to take the section for 65 minutes with 52 questions. Okay, so you should try to simulate that atmosphere on your phone, on your cute little phone. Super easy. You set a clock for 65 minutes. You open up your practice test and you'll be like, okay, I'm going to practice reading today. 52 questions. And then go through the timer. Okay, make sure it's not like physically available. So you're not like, what's the answer to this? And then use your phone. Just as if you don't have anything else. Or use a microwave. Because I know microwaves can have like timers and stuff. I don't know if they go for 65 minutes, but I think if you're trying to pace yourself, each section or each passage, you should divide the questions and time evenly. So you don't have to destroy your microwave and then it explodes, because I don't want you guys to explode your microwaves. Become familiar with literary devices and terminology. So we'll actually go over some of these right now. So analogy, tone, mood, symbolism. You probably noticed how a lot of these questions were asking for tone. This one asked for tone. We actually didn't really get any analogy or like symbolism questions, but they're there. I think symbolism, actually, we had one back here. Oh, well, anyways. So in respect to terms, okay, like analogy, tone, do you guys have any questions as to what these are? First off, like, do you guys know what an analogy is? If not, then like I will go into explaining, because that'd be helpful. No, okay, fair enough. So what is an analogy? Okay, when you look it up, it says a comparison between one thing and another, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. Let me find an example. Like a good example. Okay. Many analogies are so useful that they're part of everyday speech. They're also known as figures of speech or idioms. Each analogy below makes a comparison between two things. So you've probably heard of like comparison between two things a lot. Have you guys heard of a simile? I'm trying to differentiate between these terms. So I'm going to write it down. Simile. First off, a simile is a comparison using like or as. Example, he is sneaky like a fox. He is sneaky as a fox. These are similes. So what makes an analogy different? Finding a good man is like finding a needle in a haystack. So rather than using like or as, we have the first comparison object, which is finding a good man. And we have the second comparison object is like finding a needle in a haystack. Why are they being compared? Well, finding a needle in a haystack is like impossible because you have all those strings of hay and you're going to be digging through it for like eternity. It's basically just saying it's really difficult to find a good man without using, well, actually, oh, it does use like, oh, I guess it could be a simile too. I'm so sorry. But yeah, that's generally how you should kind of approach this stuff, except an analogy is more focused on like ideas rather than like adjective and noun for similes. And yeah, actually, I would probably revise my presentation next time for reading to kind of go over these technical terms. So I apologize for that. I did not make this presentation, but that's okay. Okay, I kind of mentioned this before. Take practice tests. So you were probably like wondering this whole time, well, you keep bringing up practice tests, Danny, but I don't know where to take a practice test. Well, you have this link that I have for you guys. If you guys want me to come back to these slides so you can write down these links, just let me know and then I'll put it there. You can also practice reading on Khan Academy, which I highly recommend. Khan Academy is free. You can literally just search up online Khan Academy and you have free practice and it's great. Make use of the process of elimination in determining correct answers and take breaks from studying as needed. So you shouldn't be, feeling horrible by the end of your session. You should generally just feel, okay, what should I work on? What should I be constructive in? So don't be afraid to take breaks. Like if you want to pause a practice session to get a banana and eat something, like you're fine, okay? Just to better simulate the testing environment is why I recommend that you guys, try to time it and sit down and take the time to, either, work online through the problems or like have like a notebook on you to kind of like go through the answers. Or even if you have a printer, print as much as the sheets of that section and then just go through it. And then the ultimate goal of you going through each section, you're gonna have like a full practice exam for the full like 2-ish hours where you're gonna be doing it ideally by paper, but if you don't, I mean, a notebook works. I don't even know where my notebook is. Oh, there it is. Okay, hold on, let me get it. Like something like this. Hey, Education USA. Like get a notebook. If you can't print out papers, view it online. Get your pen or pencil. You're gonna need number 2 pencils, by the way, at the exam. They might not always give it, but just be mindful and then just like put your answers down with the thing. The goal is just trying to simulate the testing experience. But if you have limited resources, obviously I'm not going to hold that against you because it's like, that's not your fault, right? And you're still working towards it, even if it's not like ideally perfect. Also, like ask your friends to help lend you stuff. If like, let's say you guys are taking SATs on a different day and only one of you has a calculator, let them borrow your calculator. Like cool stuff like that. Self-care. So just as important as it is to actually practice the exam, here's some stuff you can do before the exam and on the exam to, make yourself feel better. The day before or even 2 days before, do not like cram. Do not stay up till 5 a.m. on test day trying to, oh no, what if I don't get this right, blah, blah, and then you start panicking because then you feel like it's not adequate enough. But if you relax, you eat good, you sleep, then you're kind of, letting that information sit in and you're not as stressed. Prepare your testing materials the night before. So you have it on like a chair or a table or something that you can just grab and then take with you. You need pencils. This is not a pencil, this is a pen. Don't bring pens. A number 2 pencil, preferably. I've seen some people take them with mechanical pencils. I don't know if that's something you want to risk. Like it will probably work, but they do not like mechanical pencils. Also ID. So some testing centers require you to match up your face to the ID, kind of self-explanatory, so someone else isn't taking the test for you. And then sometimes they'll take your ID and then give it back to you when you leave, or they'll just check it and then you keep it. But in my experiences, they would take it. So don't try to weasel your way out of it. Exam day, eat a good breakfast, bring a snack for in between breaks. That's kind of self-explanatory. Try your best to eat good. If generally you don't have the best eating habits, try to let your family or people that care about you know that, hey, I'm taking this test. Can we, up it up just for a day? And then if not, take responsibility in your own hands, because I guarantee you, you will concentrate a lot better when you're not hungry. Shocker. And also you'll have in between breaks in the testing section. So bring like a banana or an apple or something that doesn't like spoil too quickly. I know bananas can sometimes like blacken a little bit. So what else? Maybe a mango. I love mangoes. I'm kind of craving a mango right now. So maybe you should bring a mango. Maybe even like a mini lunch, like a bento. Just some ideas. Okay, so enough of me talking. So how are you guys feeling about all this information and the reading test so far? If you guys want to just unmute, say how you're feeling.
Well, maybe it's a bit like difficult because you have to be like fast reading, but at the same time like understanding everything.
Yeah, I get it. Trust me. I wasn't perfectly naturally good at this stuff when I first did it. I've learned strategies to kind of learn how to read faster. Karen. Karen, you can go if you want.
Oh yeah. So I feel like it's a little bit dense and it could get complicated, but just when you do not know how to read the questions and don't know what they're looking for from you. So for example, if you know that you don't have like these techniques that you showed us today, like you do not have to read the whole paragraph, you just have to look for like key items in the questions. I think that makes it a little bit easier.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is the point is to avoid you exercising more effort than you need to. I know before people were raising their hands. Diana, did you want to say anything? I know you unmuted. That's why I was wondering, Diana, if you wanted to say anything. If not, oh,
Oh no,
oh,
sorry.
okay. No, you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure I wasn't skipping anybody. Okay, next. Vania.
I feel that this section will be the most challenging for me because I think that math is more easier than just read and analyze this each question. So yeah, but I feel like I learned a lot because like the way that you approach this test was like even if you didn't read the passage, you can solve it, and that got super awesome for me because I just take many time to read and reread and then reread what I read, and I didn't even understand what I did. So
Right.
this will be really a good tip for me is to try to solve each question before to read the passage and don't waste more time.
Right. I'm glad. No, I'm glad because I get it. I would read stuff and I don't get it. And it's like I just wasted 5 minutes. Type.
Yeah, as Vania said, I think like the challenging part is to understand those complex senses. This is why I think I should work more on on understanding them and trying to familiarize with the question, because like the techniques you gave us were really useful.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, like, no one tells you to think of this stuff when you take tests. Like, when you first take the test, your immediate response isn't to read the passage. Well, it is to read the passage. No, I'm confusing myself. Your first response is to just read the passages and then go back. But it's like we didn't even like know the passage for some of these. Like this one, how do I know? But we already knew what to look for in the question. Like we didn't even need this or a passage, right? Like it's stuff like that. It's mastering critical thinking as opposed to like something that obviously you're gonna be at a disadvantage of if you don't understand like certain English words or like sentences, because like reading this passage. Okay, I speak English, and I am like, what is some of this? Prolonged mental inventory of her clothes and looks. Like, no one talks like this, right? And I think that's kind of the nature of a lot of English exams, because I know even in like in Korea, they have like their own test for English. You read it, like actual English speakers read it, and it's like, no one talks like this at all. So it's not really a skill of how good your English is or how good at reading you are, ironically, because it's called the reading test. But it's critical thinking and knowing what the test is looking for. That's literally all it is. So even if you like suck at reading, it's not a test of how smart you are or how cool you are or your potential, because it's not going to check potential. It's just a test to see how good you are at, patterns and looking at certain things that the test wants you to look at. It's not like if you get a bad score, okay, I'll drop my score. I took the ACT, not the SAT, but it's like similar principles. Who wants to guess my first score on the ACT? I'm gonna, for some of the people that don't know, like the score range, 1 really bad, 36 perfect score. Okay, guess what I got on the ACT first try.
28.
Lower.
20.
You guys are so generous. I'll keep you guys guessing. Just put like your guesses in the chat of what I got first time I took the ACT. To be fair, it was hard. And
Please, which questions or like I'd say, what does the ACT test like? Reading, math, or what?
oh, ACT? Okay, wait. Okay, let me explain this better. Okay, first, before I answer the question, Mania's was the closest. Mine was actually 23. The first time I took the ACT. Sorry. Okay, so let me just actually put in the chat. I took ACT, different from SAT. So I will actually pull up the other slideshow so you guys can see the difference between the tests. But I had a really bad score. And it sucks. But you get better. Also, I do research at college now, and I go to an elite college. So clearly, if I suck at testing, it's not going to be the end of the world for you, because you have other strengths, and that's really important. So if you feel bad, I'm literally not the expert at testing either, but I've gotten better. So, Tab, would you like to ask your question again for everyone to?
I wanted to know what are the parts in the ACT test, like reading and other parts. What are they?
Right. So I'm gonna go to the other presentation to show you guys, just so you guys understand a little bit of the different structure. 1 second. Okay.
I'm sorry to bother you.
Okay. So here's the neat little slideshow I made about comparing the two. And I'll just kind of do this as a review since you guys have time and we're chilling. ACT, as someone said, yes, there is a science section, but I'm telling you right now, the science section is like literally the same as the SAT reading science section, except it's just a designated section for it. So here we go. Differences in the tests. So as you can see here, we have the reading, English, math, science, and essay section for the ACT. And SAT is just reading, writing / language, and mathematics. So you'll notice they have different names, the writing/language section and the English section, but it's literally like the same thing. It's like English grammar and stuff. But the good thing is you just have to memorize rules for those and you're fine. The time difference is also different. The ACT has more questions and less time. So the ACT sucks, and which is why not a lot of people take it. But my state required it, so that's a loss for me. Oh, actually, someone is sending me a message. Okay. So more information about the recordings. I know you guys want to have the recordings uploaded to the YouTube beforehand, or at least have them on you. I will ask my advisors to see what they can do. Also, before I forget, oh my gosh, because I know people are going to be leaving soon. So does this answer your question, Type?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, you can take a picture of that if you want, or if you want me to just kind of like share parts of the slideshows with you guys, do let me know. Another thing, I will ask my advisors to see what they can do about the recordings. So don't worry about that. Thank you for your question. And yeah, let me actually show you guys the WhatsApp study group just in case, because I know some of you would really like that. And in case you need more practice on the strategies, I'll try to make a notes section and post it in the WhatsApp. I can ask my advisors if I'm allowed to share the PowerPoints. I mean, I should, but all the information from the PowerPoints, I'm going to put in notes and then share on our WhatsApp. So before you go, I know a lot of people left already, but thankfully a lot of people are already in the WhatsApp. So I posted the link. If you have WhatsApp, you can join our little study group, and then you guys get to be friends with me the whole summer as I send you a bunch of stuff to make you study. So basically school, but for the summer. Yay, I know. But there you go, that's the link. Make sure you guys please join. I know some of you guys are already in there. I appreciate it so much. Yay. And yeah, that kind of concludes the session, but I'm going to stop recording